Hello, you are very welcome back if you are a return listener, or if this is your first time, you are very welcome to Your Play or Mine, the only podcast that combines the worlds of the creative arts and sport in the one show. I'm your host, Sarah Mackenzie Foley, and this is season 1, episode 3. I'm joined on this episode by someone who has potentially mixed the most curious career combo I've ever encountered, because she has combined contemporary art with professional offshore sailing. Name a more interesting combination. I'll wait. Okay, I won't actually wait because then we would never get to hear the episode. But the guest that I have on this month is just intriguing, I feel like is the best word to describe her. It is none other than the incredible Pamela Lee. I really hope you enjoy, and do make sure, if you are a new listener, to go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2. Pamela, welcome to Your Play or Mine. It's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
This is an interesting fact that I only learned recently, but only nice. So there's 90% of all podcasts that are ever created don't make it to episode 3, and this is episode 3 of Your Player Mind. So you're officially pushing me into the top 10% of consistency. So thank you for being on the show today.
Lucky number 3.
As always, I'm lucky number 3, exactly. As always, I'm going to start the show off with my 3 kickoff questions, which are the same for every guest. And I want to know, first of all, what's your very first sporting memory?
Well, first, I'm very glad that we're doing 3 questions on your 3rd episode. They're lucky number 3. First question, yes. First sporting memory. This is quite a tricky one, actually. I was trying to think back, and I realized I have lots of very early sporting memories. So then I was, I can remember, I think most of my early memories are actually sporting in some way, various things. Like I can remember really early swimming lessons, and like trying to learn to hold my breath in the bottom of the pool and being terrified, which is kind of funny now because I spend a lot of time in the sea. But I remember that one really stuck with me. And then I remember like doing like ladybirds. Remember that was the thing before brownies, which was like the girls' version of scouts.
Yeah.
And I remember a sports day. Yeah, ladybirds. I remember a sports day, and I remember like winning loads of ribbons and like being like, okay. Cool.
I like this winning thing.
And that I'd totally forgotten about that until I started thinking about these ones. And then but I think my actual probably earliest and probably most core sporting memory, and here's I kind of like it because it's, I guess we're using like sport loosely, because I really think of sport as it's something that we play competitively and something that we compete in, but like there's also so many sports and so many people who play sports and so many ways to play sports that's nothing to do with competition. It's just activity and enjoyment. And that's a really big part of it for me, and particularly this type of sports that I do now in life. In school, it was much more all about competition. So I think my earliest core sporting memory is when we were younger. My parents we had this camper van. Like the camper van was like one of those big camper vans, but it was actually I think it was a year older than me. So it was pretty old camper van, been around. And so 4 kids packed into this camper van, mum and dad, dog. One year my granny came as well, so I'm not sure which year is which, but like a lot of people in this van. And then there would be like a trailer on the back, and there'd be everything on the trailer. So we had toppers, which are these like I don't know if you know them, like these small dinghies. They're made of like really hard plastic, so they're really durable, so they're really good for kids and just messing around. So like there'd be a topper on it, and then kayaks and canoes, and I had this like inflatable crocodile that I loved. The inflatable crocodile, he would be on there. And we'd go on the ferry over to the ferry from wherever. I don't know if it was Dublin or where we were going from somewhere in Ireland over to France. And I think at that time most of the ferries kind of only went into the northern part of Western France, which and again weirdly is actually where I live now. But anyway, lots of we're driving there, and then mum and dad would take it in turns driving the whole way down France, and they drive at nighttime because there was less cars in the road, and all of us would be like sleeping in the back down to Bordeaux, where there was like this lake or something, and we used to camp by this lake for several weeks, just like pitch up the camper van, all the things, whatever, run around, be free. And we used to go out in the topper in the lake, and it was really safe because it's just a lake. So dad would go out, and we'd take like 3 or 4 of us in the topper, and we used to play this capsizing game. So dad would like capsize the boat and we all had to find different parts of the boat to hang on to, and then he would capsize the boat and then jump around onto the dagger board and right it, so do like a full kind of turtle thing with the boat. And the thing that we were supposed to do was like find somewhere in the boat that we could hang on to, so that when he flipped it over the other side, we'd pop up with it. So you have like one person hanging on the mast, 2 people like hanging onto the tow straps where there's actually a air bubble in between, and like that was the game. And we'd get him to do it. I'm sure we would get him to do it like again and again and again and again.
Of course.
And it's like this weird blur of memories of like the camper van, just water toys, messing in the water, and like I guess it really stuck because like it totally eradicated that fear of what, like later when I went to do sailing courses and stuff like that, I remember like some kids would be really scared of capsizing, but for me I was like, no, but capsizing is a fun game, you know. So it really like implanted that funness to I don't know, like messing around, and it's like really stuck with me. And I think that must be tied in there with one of the earliest ones, but it's definitely one of the core ones. Like it comes to my mind a lot. So I think that's it. And it's cool because it's sport, like we're messing around in the water, but it's just play and activity and whatever. So there you go. I think that's it.
Oh, I love that story. That's fantastic. Definitely back more to the competitive side, I'm going to say, with this one. Who is your personal sporting GOAT, your absolute greatest of all time? It could be any sport whatsoever.
I don't think I'm naturally someone who like pins a lot of glory on one particular person. I like to, what I do a lot is like I have a lot of, I guess you'd call like idols or heroes or whatever, and I feel like they're all heroes or idols for different reasons, and I kind of look at them and see what they've done and how they do what they do, and see what parts of that I can see in myself, or what parts of that I can kind of take into building my own career or my own performance or how I sail. And particularly in offshore sailing, because there's really no direct route to how you get to where you are. It's not like you don't just do county league and then varsities and then national, and there's not a pathway. So it's interesting to look at how other sailors have, I guess, woven their path to what I see as the top. So there's a few names of like sailors like that I could list off, and kind of new ones come in all the time. And particularly a few in history, women in history and stuff like that, who've just done remarkable things. But then I was thinking, I was like, okay, no, I have to think of one person. And and you know what I think it came to mind? I think Kelly Slater might actually be there, because he's surfing in itself is an incredible sport. It fits in that box of, as I said, a sport that you can just do for your own pleasure and enjoyment, but it's also a sport that you can compete in at a really high level. But it's also like here we're talking, I'm sure we're going to touch on art later, but art and sport, but like when you watch surfers surf,
incredible.
It's incredible the way it's so intuitive, and the way they carve on the wave it's beautiful. It's like you've got to have some sort of creative flow when you're doing that. And then on the other side of it, it's incredible. Like when you see surfers surfing big waves, getting an absolute beat down, like physically, mentally, everything. And then also like the connection to nature and everything like that. And then you look at someone like Kelly Slater, and he's performed at the highest of the high level for so long. And done on everything else, and there's so many other sides to him and so I think that he would probably be one of them. I mean, there's so many, but I think, yeah, for those reasons. And I just think surfing in
Yeah,
itself is such a remarkable sport and art and incredible thing to be able to do. Like I surf,
for
but
sure.
like I'm not like I surf for fun and I enjoy it. But like even when I'm out surfing, I'm looking at other surfers going, Jesus,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah.
wish I
No,
wish I could
for
surf like
sure.
that.
It's
You know?
like you said, it's art and
It's like
sport in one. Like it's
yeah, it's like
yeah.
acrobats. It's and the understanding the sea and reading the waves and there's so many different variety. Like you can't just go and practice hitting the ball into like you can't just go practice shooting a goal in surfing because the
Mm,
conditions change every time. So like it's
yeah,
the level is really it's kind of yeah next level. So I think that is like one of the water sports kind of thing is really the pinnacle. I think something probably
for
most people
sure.
can relate to as well.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think it's one of the few sports where, because it is so directly, like your performance is directly dependent on the natural conditions. I feel like
Yeah.
it's one of the really few ones, maybe the only one actually, where you're like at one with the sport. Like the human and the sport are kind of like the same thing, and the nature, like it's all just
Yeah.
encompassed in one. It's sort of, and then the result, as you said, it's basically poetry in motion as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. Like it's really,
Yeah.
it's absolutely amazing what they're able to do out
Yeah. And
there.
you get points on how good it looks, but also how clean
Hmm.
it is. And you've got to like make the wave work for you. And it's just like a person aboard on the sea.
Hmm.
Pretty
Amazing.
simple
I
also.
love that
Yeah.
answer. Fantastic. What would you say is the most emotional sporting moment you've ever experienced? I know this one might be tough as well because you've obviously competed and we've all been spectators too, of course. So it could be either or both, whichever has been the most emotional for you.
Yeah, I think I got one of each. I got one of each. They're
Nice.
very, very, very different. So I think
Love it.
yeah, the most emotional one for me, from my experience of sport, unless there's something I'm forgetting, which means it obviously wasn't at the top of the list if I've forgotten it, but it was actually very recently, in November, um,
Mm,
when I did the Transat Czech Varb, which is a double-handed transatlantic race. It's the longest double-handed trans race, and finishing that race because there was so that was it was the biggest it was kind of like the pinnacle. It's the biggest race that I've skippered at that level so far, so it was really a big milestone for me as a sailor. And also there was a huge so much work went into it behind the
mm,
scenes, because when we're talking about offshore sailing, like you build you build the whole project yourself from scratch, from getting the
mm,
sponsors to getting the boat together to getting the team to everything. And it's something that I had envisaged. The race is every 2 years, and I had been at the race before and had said I want to be on the start line in 2 years time. And at that point I had nothing. I had never even sailed one of those boats before. So like
yeah,
it was pretty aspirational, and then to have been there as a skipper, and then even to get to the start line is just all encompassing on every level of budget, project management, learning as a sailor, team, just everything. It took everything to get to the start line. And then you get to the start line, and then you still have this huge race to do. And the weather was absolutely insane. Like we got absolutely hammered at the start of the race. They had to do a pit stop. Like it was absolutely bonkers. And yeah, just actually there's so much that can happen even from the point that you start the race to actually getting to the finish. Like a lot of boats don't finish
yeah.
because things can break, things can go wrong. So that if it's the weather, like there's a lot of elements that are also out of your control. So you don't even know if you put in all this work and then you have to stop and you don't even get to the other end. And
Mm,
that's like, well, cool. So getting to the finish of that, and yeah, it was like a huge. My family was there at the finish as well, and my manager
oh,
who worked with, we built the project together, and it was just such a huge sense of like job done. Like
mm-hmm.
just like yes, we did it, and it was a huge just for myself, like proving to myself that I could do it and I could compete at that level. And also like I was proving to myself that even how hard it was, I finished it, and I was just like, well, how do I do that again but better? So it was almost like that relief that like, yeah, I think I am on the right track. Like I should keep pursuing it, because I think you're always questioning yourself, especially when it's a sport and a project that takes so much of your life to just make happen. And a lot of like your like support from family, support from friends, support from all of that, like, and you just don't want to let people down, you don't want to let yourself down, you don't want to finish and be like, oh, do you know what, actually I really like that. I'm gonna
never doing that again.
Yeah. And just that on so many levels, and delivering for the sponsors, and just yeah, it was really, really, really huge, and it was a really good validation for me that I can do it. It is worth the effort, and that I want to keep going on the pathway that I've chosen. So that was really, really huge. And it's super cool when you finish the boats come out. Anyway, any kind of celebration of like a huge finishing race, as it is, you know, all of that is just an amazing experience. Anyway, hard to really put it into words. So yeah, so that was very, 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 very cool. And it was, to this date, it would be like the kind of culmination of my offshore sailing so far. But it really feels for me, I'm like, but it's actually just the first step, and it felt like a really good solid step that I wanted to do for myself so that I could progress further, which is what I'm working on now. So that's my one. And then sporting spectating, as I said, very different. Rugby. Do you remember when they were building the new Aviva Stadium? It's still called Lansdowne Road.
Yeah,
it was getting changed.
Yeah, I know it took me years to stop calling it
still like,
Lansdowne Road. Yeah.
I think I was in like 5th year of school, or maybe 6th year, and they were playing the rugby matches in Croke Park. And it was like a little bit like, ooh, rugby in Croke Park, and there was a bit of all that chat around it. Yeah. And then so there's kind of all that energy around it anyway, and I was in a school with rugby and whatever, and yeah, whole family loves rugby, love going to the rugby. And they had schoolboy tickets going in school, and initially the schoolboy tickets were for the first pick for the rugby team and the boys. And I remember going, hey, that's not fair. Like, I think the seniors hockey team should also get like in the dip of the schoolboy tickets. Thank you very much. So then they're like, okay. So they put the girls in as well. And then they were drawing out the names for getting the tickets or whatever. And I got the Ireland England match. And I was like, oh, amazing. And my mate, and one of my best friends, Lucia, she got the France Ireland match or something. And then a younger kid also got the France Ireland match, or the England. And anyway, we managed to get this younger kid to swap her tickets so that she could get the England Ireland to meet. And so the two of us had the England Ireland tickets, and the lads were like, you could see them boiling. We were like, yes. And so anyway, it was like just this nice like little win getting the tickets. And then we went to the game, and like the energy was just next level, because it's England rugby, Croke Park, like all the history around it. And I was doing history in school, and our history teacher was like super into Irish history and all of that. So we were like all pumped up on Irish history, ready for our leaving cert. fresh of the history of the Bloody Sunday and all of that. Wow. Going into Croke Park, feeling very patriotic. And then we were like in Hill 16, like right behind the post, and Ireland just played like a stormer. Like they just played I didn't think they had an option really. Obviously they couldn't have.
Yeah, fair.
There would have been stampedes. And anyway, they played amazing, and it was amazing, and the energy was just electric, and it was just such an accumulation of how sport and culture and history and all of that are just like so fired up and wrapped into one. And it was really cool. I think that match just sticks in my mind forever. So
100%. I'm so jealous that you were there. I'm very, very jealous. As a lifelong rugby fan. Incredible. So we had a chance to chat on the phone before we scheduled to record this, and
Yeah.
I have to say, just off that one conversation alone, I had so many different threads that I wanted to go deeper on. So many of the things that you mentioned with me, or to me, really resonated, but one of them in particular, it's kind of why I started the podcast, I suppose, that does cross these two worlds together, was the feeling of being other, because people always want to put other people in like niche little boxes where they're easier to understand, and in reality we're much more complex, you know, in our interests than that, and they can vary so widely. But you gave me a fantastic example where you talked about the fact that a lot of people in sailing come from very mechanically minded and sort of mathematically minded backgrounds, or like that's how their brains sort of work, whereas you're a really visual person, and people have actually commented on the fact that you bring a very different lens to sort of things that happen on the boat. Can you kind of talk to me a bit more about that and why it's so important to push through that othered feeling and try and reframe it as something positive, where you're actually bringing something to the table that maybe nobody else in that environment can bring?
Yeah, I definitely like always thought of myself as arty. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm always arty, and in school I always gravitated toward art subjects. I was like A in art, A in music, all of it. And I was still in honors maths and everything. Like, so I obviously could do it. But whether it was just like my preference or even anyway, so just definitely just always, yeah, sort of myself as an arty, and I'm definitely like really, really visual person. I liked tech graphics, which actually aligns quite well with sailing. When I try to think back on it, do you know what I mean? So really visual, and even now, when I'm sailing, because we do a lot of because it's offshore sailing, so we do a lot of weather analysis, and that I find like it's very visual as well, and I really need to like
Yeah.
see the visual to analyze it, where I think other people can kind of do it a bit more in their head, but I really need to be able to visualize it. And the same with the sails and the trimming and stuff. Like I really need to be able to see the whole picture and kind of visualize it. And yeah, when I started, so I've been sailing always since a kid and always playing sport. But when I was living in Australia, and I was managing an art gallery there, because I originally worked in contemporary art, having followed that passion or that thread. Like when I was coming out of school, I was like, well, whatever I do, I'm going to end up doing something creative. Like that was it, full stop. Like for something creative, it has to be, which is weird because I don't think people would put offshore sailing into the creative category. I probably wouldn't have put it in that category, but literally leaving school, it was like, just it will be something creative. I wasn't exactly sure what, but it would be something creative. So anyway, I had done my undergrad in communications and photography, and then my master's, and then I was managing that gallery. But I wanted to keep sailing, so I had started looking around in Sydney to try and crew on offshore boats, because I wanted to do the Sydney Hobart, because I thought it looked pretty cool. And yeah, so I was kind of walking around on the docks, and the way it kind of works, I was like walking around the docks trying to talk to teams and trying to get on boats, so like trying to get invited on, and then you sail with them and you hope that they like you, and then basically that's kind of how you get to sail without owning your own boat. You get to kind of be part of the team. There's no like selection. Well, there is when you get higher up, but at that point no kind of selection process. It was just a kind of trial and error. And yeah, I ended up on teams like of one of the boats that I sailed with for a really, really long time, and they retrained me up. It was basically a boat of engineers, because the main guy, the owner, skipper, he was an engineer, Derek, and then a lot of the guys he kind of knew from work and different stuff, so recruited them in like a kind of group of engineers. Maybe there was one physio as well, but like very much that kind of engineering brain type of it. And yeah, I felt so different, because I was like, my brain must not work the same way, because I feel like in school we get taught that you kind of either have a maths brain or an art brain or a different brain. You know what I mean? Like this idea of having a brain that works in a certain way. I don't know if it's just me that had that impression growing up.
No,
and
totally
like,
agree.
oh no, I don't have a music brain, or oh no, I don't have an English brain, a writing brain, so like I can't do that. And you kind of almost box it off, which only now that we're talking about it, I'm actually like, that actually seems mental. Like that you could grow up thinking that you have a brain to do something, because then you don't even try it, and you don't even open it up to
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So I definitely thought that I like didn't have a maths brain, didn't have an engineering brain. I just had the creative brain, which is actually stupid when you think about it now. Because as I said, like I did honors. Like
Yeah.
obviously it's not actually true. But yeah, so I really thought that, and I'd actually like bashed my confidence a little bit because I was like, well, I don't even know if I have the kind of brain to be capable to be good at this. If this is what everyone else, if this is how everyone else thinks it, and sailing is quite a kind of mathematical sport, and it involves a lot of analytical thinking, and that's definitely how it's viewed as a sport. But then I remember the skipper said to me one time, he was like, oh, he literally said it to me, he was like, well, actually, I can't even remember how it came up in the topics, but he said he really enjoyed having me on board because I looked at things in such a different way than the rest of them looked at it, and it just brought another frame of mind and another way of questioning and another way of analyzing and looking at it, aside from all the engineers, and it was really refreshing. And funnily enough, he said the same thing about having females on board, because a lot of the time, the other times that I felt other is because in a lot of the sailing teams and things like that, it's a really male dominated sport. And so a lot of the other times that I felt other is because I happened to be the female there. And this skipper, Derek, he actually said, I specifically want some women on the team because I think that the diversity that they bring in the way that they think and just mannerisms, and it's good to have a different group of people. If everyone on the team is working and thinking the same way, you're not going to get a broad picture of kind of what you want to achieve. And offshore sailing in particular, it's a big picture game because you've got the boat, you've got the ocean, you've got the sails, there's so much there. So I think it's kind of interesting that you talk of other in the brain thinking sense, and the other way that it comes up as well is in the female thing. And more I think people are more and more realizing that there's a benefit in having others or difference or a dynamic mix of people involved in teams, and I think that's happening more and more in sport as well. And it's definitely something I try to, because I'm living here in France, so there's quite a few other categories that come onto it. One, I'm a foreigner in France. I did do French in school, but I've had to like really learn it since being here. And I'm working on French teams. I'm sailing with French people, and my French is very good now. Like I sail in French and no problem, and I'm working French no problem, but I'm not fluent. It's not my first language. So you're still a little bit outside, you're still a little bit of an other. There's still always a little step you're going to miss. So there's that kind of otherness. And then there's, as you said, like I come from quite a different background to a lot of the sailors. Like a lot of the French sailors, they've just been sailing their whole lives and this and that and that, or they're engineers by training or this other thing. And I've got this very, as I said, different, they probably don't even know, but I'm conscious that I have a different background and a different way that I came. And I know that my brain, I have a different brain or whatever as well. So I'm conscious of that. And then in a lot of the time, less and less so, and I'm in more and more projects that are actually female focused, but a lot of the time you're one of the few, if not only, females on a team as well, so it's like another other. So I spend a lot of time trying to think about what it is that I do have, and how I can bring that to the table, and rather than trying to compete directly with those around me, I try to look at what I have that's different that I can bring alongside them. Do you know what I mean? So it's not, how can I, okay, well, what do they have that, and that? Okay, well, what do they don't have? What do they not have that maybe I do have? And how can I bring that? And then that's how I can get on the team or get a step ahead or make a little difference. And it's kind of the same in a race. When you're racing offshore, it's tactical. It's not like you're not running around a track, you're deciding your route and where to go. It's tactical, and you're not going to beat someone ahead of you by following them. The only way to get ahead of someone who's ahead of you is if they fuck up, and so then you just get past. So then you're just waiting for them to do that, and that's not really good, or if you do something different, that gets you ahead. So actually, you kind of need to be thinking not just in comparison to other people.
Yeah. Like, I think it's so important to underline that reframing and to, I do think it's largely kind of put into us during the school years. Like when you're in your education, it's sort of, you are told, you know, oh, well, you're really good at this, so you should probably stick to other things that are similar to that. Or maybe even you're narrowed down even further to just that one thing.
Yeah.
And it's so limiting. And that's again, like, that is a big part of why I think it's so important to unearth these examples, people like you who have, you know, it takes courage, and it takes you know, self-assurance and self-belief to look at that difference and to say, well, yeah, like it's a difference, but why does that have to have a negative connotation? And actually, how do I use it to my advantage? Because I think that if you embedded that sort of attitude much younger, I think people would be much more comfortable with, you know, experimenting more with the routes that they go down, and also just not shutting sections of themselves off, because I don't think that really ever serves anybody, you know?
Yeah, like it's like sometimes I think to myself now, I'm like, God, I wish I'd just done engineering. Why didn't I? And I was like, oh, because I really thought I didn't have that brain or whatever. You know, obviously now I'm glad I didn't do engineering, because then it would have obviously it wasn't what I wanted to do. But like, I definitely just thought I didn't have that. It just wasn't, as exactly as you said, it was just like that kind of cut off. You had to go like one avenue or the other. But I think I get the impression that there is, particularly in companies and stuff, that there is much more of a kind of openness to hiring different types of people and trying to build dynamic teams and stuff like that. And I think that does come into more and more into sailing teams now as well. I think it's really cool, because at the end of the day, if you've got a team of, say, I do what a lot of I do is shorthanded sailing, so it's solo or double, in which case you need to be able to do everything. But then if you're going to join a team, it's like you don't want 5 skippers anyway.
Like, that's a nightmare.
One skipper, one navigator, one trimmer, and one person who can fix the boat. You know what I mean? Or 2 and 1 or whatever. So like when you're building a team like that, I guess it's the same on a rugby team and a thing. So it's almost like we need to take that building a sporting team analogy and apply it across the blanket, because
everywhere,
it's no good
everywhere.
It's no good if everyone's the same.
Exactly. I think we're 100% agreed on that.
That's one of the things that I really think, like, sport is really, really, really important for kids and for growing up and to continue playing sport, because I guess if you're part of a team like that when you're younger, subconsciously you probably start to recognize that you have a strength that you're adding to the team, and someone else has the strength they're adding to the team. And I think that's a huge thing that I try to do, is really communicate on girls and females' involvement in sport, because there's been a lot of studies showing that there's really much higher dropout numbers for girls, particularly in teens and stuff, as they get up, and then they just don't take it back up and they're not playing it. And I'm like, well, these are some of the like innate lessons or like subconscious lessons, as well as learning to lose, learning to win, learning to be part of a team, all of that. But even just that thing that we were just talking about understanding that just because you're playing a role and you have strengths doesn't mean you can't do, you know what I mean? Like, and if you're not learning that as a team, and if girls are learning that less than guys or whatever, then how's that impacting their self-confidence and their choices in life and their inner happiness and all of that stuff? So
it's absolutely very it's absolutely, it's a very there's huge domino effects that I think, you know, systems are built for large numbers of people, and obviously, you know, there's an understanding around that as well. But yeah, I think where possible, we should just be encouraging people to keep their minds open and be willing to try different things and not be afraid to fail as well. As you said, it's a great life lesson. I would say there's definitely a theme that comes up pretty much all of the time at like the highest level across sports and the arts, which is that from the outside in, people have this perception of people that are in those professions that you're like living the dream and it's all, rosy in the garden and it's all amazing. Which, of course, if you're following your passion, like that is super fulfilling, 100%. But the reality is that there's a very challenging road to achieving it in the first place. And as you said earlier, it's not even, a lot of the time, it's not even linear, that road. And I think that applies across whatever you're going for, whether it's art or sport. How do you reconcile that when people maybe come to you with that point of view on the career that you've managed to create? What kind of conversations kind of happen around that for you?
I think it's definitely applicable in all sports. But I'm finding it's even not even more a huge kind of topic or something that's coming up in my sport that I'm having with quite a few other sailors, is because with offshore sailing, like basically the way that the project run is like we run on sponsorship, and that's the way the system works here in France particularly. So you have a project and a boat, and 90% of the time it's funded through sponsorship, but the same way that rugby teams and stuff are funded through sponsorship, except it's just more on an individual project level. And it's kind of up to you, the skipper or the project, a lot of the time to get that sponsorship. And so you're essentially a communications tool or a communications output for the company that's sponsoring you. So social media can come hugely into that. Both in when you're kind of starting off and you're trying to secure sponsorship and build the project and get companies to believe in what you can bring to them. It comes into that, and then also it comes into the demand for output from the sponsors as well. And so it can lead to a huge demand for media content, and so a huge demand for social media. And I think that's exactly the place where you just see the shiny, happy, we're going sailing, this is amazing side of it. And it really doesn't show, often it does show this is really hard. The sailing bit is hard. Do you know what I mean? You're out in a boat in the middle of the sea on your own, it's freezing cold, the weather conditions are terrible, and you can do a selfie video. So we all get that the actual sailing bit is hard, but it doesn't show the work that's gone in to get to be sailing. The same as in another sport, to get to be on the start line, to get to be on the pitch. We understand the work that goes on the pitch or during the race or whatever, but it's the work behind that's put into that. And particularly, I think, when it comes to the social media and stuff, and particularly when it's involved with, it is an amazing sport that I do, and that's why I love it. And I do get to go sailing across the ocean to the Caribbean, and I do see dolphins, and and they are amazing. And yes, I will put a picture of a dolphin on my Instagram, and I don't want to take away from that. And you are out in nature and everything like that, but because you worked really, really, really hard to get there for those small little moments of glory. And I really get it a lot. Just living this kind of amazing life off chasing your dreams and sailing. And you're like, well, I made the decision to chase my dreams, and depends how you look at it, but I might have made a lot of sacrifices along the way. For me, one of the big questions it will come or is coming is okay, well, what if I meet someone and we decide we want to have kids, and then how do I go offshore for several months? You know what I mean? How do I maintain my competitive level? How do I train? What does that mean if I have a sponsor, because I can't do the races that are in it? That's just one example. So I'm in my mind potentially sacrificing that option in my life, or else I'm going to have to sacrifice my career choice in my life. So it's just even that's just a really obvious one behind it. But then it's the work on the other side of it is as well. I think Gaelic football is probably a really good example, where they're essentially professional athletes, yet unable to work as a professional athlete, and that comes into sailing, like what I'm doing in sailing as well. Like I'm a professional sailor, I get paid to sail, so I'm a professional sailor. And but yet I'm not on a team full time. I'm still independent. So
Mm.
whilst I'm kind of building my project, looking for sponsors, working with other teams, I'm also running my own fitness program, trying to, so yeah, kind of working a full-time job in one sense, working as hard as I can to keep up to like maximum peak fitness so that when I do go sailing, I'm able to perform. And then also trying to fit in things like studying, like studying weather patterns,
Yeah.
studying boats, and like all that intellectual side of it. I'm packing it all in behind it. So it's just, yeah, I think with any sport, and the same with art, if the you know, you always see the output, and I think we can really easily forget to look behind the output. And I think that goes for Instagram, and social media doesn't help at all, I think.
No.
Just like another one of those times where I think sport is just a really good analogy, and art for actual the mini scenarios of everyone's life. But somehow we always forget to, we know, because we do it, everyone does it themselves, everyone has their own battles to get to where they are, and we so easily forget to apply that when looking at other people. And yeah, I think sport can be a really good highlighter to that.
For sure.
Yeah, and then again, when you're competing, or if you're on a team, even if you're younger or a teenager, like, you know, the work that you put in to get there or not, and so then it kind of makes it a bit more relatable. That again
Yeah,
makes sense or
certainly.
not.
No, completely. And I do want to touch on the art side a bit more, because you
Yeah.
mentioned that you'd been managing the gallery in Sydney for a few years, which to me sounds like, you know, the kind of role that you would aspire to, let's say, when you start off. But I when we chatted originally, you kind of mentioned to me that you felt as though you hit a ceiling there. And I know that, like, for me, I can definitely relate to that feeling at different stages of my own career, but there's often this temptation to like wait it out, or you convince yourself that things are going to get better at some like unknown date in the future. For you in that situation, how did that feel, and what did you decide to do about it? Because you didn't wait around, and I love that you didn't wait around. You kind of found another way to fulfill the two things at once, really.
I was thinking about this a little bit, and yeah, I think it's a really big and non-stop question when
Yeah.
you're someone who, you know, pursues a passion job or a passion career, like whether it's sport or art or music or anything. It's just that questioning of like, am I doing the right thing? Should I keep pushing? How far do I keep pushing? You know what I mean? And that, like, I think is really applicable, and to anyone who's, yeah, really pursuing a dream, because you've kind of got this weird ever ongoing battle about, almost like a guilt about pursuing being lucky enough to pursue your dream. But in reality, I think for most of us who do like pursue a dream, actually there's not really any option. Because if you didn't,
Yeah.
you wouldn't,
You'd
you
go nuts.
couldn't, you couldn't. When I came to trying to decide between, yeah, I'd worked in the gallery and I'd kind of worked my way up, and yeah, I was in a place that years previously I would have loved to be in. Do you know what I mean? And I was able to recognize that. But I guess I'm quite ambitious, and I'm definitely someone who, I always need to have something in front of me, like something to be going towards and something to be
Yeah.
working towards. And it's when I can't see my route forward, is when for me personally, I get like, that's when I get in like my anxious place. You know what I mean? If I'm not like, okay, where's the progress? Where's the next step? What am I working towards? Why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Because what am I, you know, where's the next thing? And I kind of reached that in Sydney, managing the gallery. I kind of felt like I couldn't see the next step. And there was a few things I thought about it, and I was like, okay, well, what are the factors that are, I think the thing is like, it's what are the factors that are hindering me? And
Mm.
are they factors that I can do something about? And if there is something to be done about that, am I willing to do that to continue on this route? I think is
Mm.
what it came down to. And for me, a lot of the factors felt like they came down to the fact that I was kind of, at that point, I was managing the gallery. And I guess I thought for me, the next big step that I wanted to do was be working in one of the big museums or a big institution or something like that, or, you know, upwards and forwards. And I felt that like a lot of the jobs that I was applying to or positions I was looking at were very restricted by my visa situation. And so I was kind of like, right, it's kind of a block that, what can I do about it? Okay, well, I can continue on this path until, you know, in how many years' time I get my residency. And then when I have my residency, I'll be able to apply for these jobs. And then when I have later, in another few years, my citizenship, I'll be able to apply for any job I want. And I was like, do I want to put, is that what I want to do? Is that, or do I want to stay here and do
Mm-hmm.
that in order to get this result? Is it really worth that for me? And at that point I just thought, no, I'm not doing, if that's what I need to do to get to my next step, it's not what I want to do, and it's not how I want to play it. So I guess I looked at it in that kind of analytical way. And I think it's also another thing is like thinking about what you can give to the situation as well. Like I was like, I felt like I had more to give than what I was doing in the gallery. I felt I had like more to achieve and more to give, and I felt like I wasn't in a position where I could do it. So I just like, I felt like I was kind of bursting out.
Yeah.
And and I didn't want to stay in that position, and the route that I saw out of it was too slow, too long, and wasn't satisfying, because it wasn't actually something that I was controlling, that my hard work could not make that situation progress. I just had to wait for the visas or whatever. Maybe my hard work on a visa application in 3 years' time. But do you know what I mean? It wasn't like something that I could work my way out of. And I think that was really kind of what it came down to. Like, did I have autonomy in the situation? And I guess I felt that I didn't. And so then the need to pivot, or the analysis to pivot, came along. And I think that happens in like many situations throughout our life. Like you envisage what you think the pathway is, and you hit a roadblock and you have to go, oh, okay, sidestep, big pivot, small pivot, U-turn, and move across. But yeah, I think it was that. It was like whether there was something I could actually, what was the solution, and was I happy to deal with that solution in that way or not? And I think that's how I then went sailing. Big sidestep.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, you know, kind of taking the power back in the situation, and recognizing, you know, what you, as you said, what you have control over, as opposed to feeling like life is happening to you. You know, it's kind of actually saying to yourself, what can I make happen myself? And I think sometimes we maybe underestimate that we have more power within ourselves, I think, than we realize sometimes, because we just get into these habits, which is understandable. That's kind of how we're sort of set up these days. But I think it's great to step outside of that as well.
Yeah, and I don't think it's always directly clear as well. And I think it can be really scary, because I was thinking about it again the last few days when you sent me the thing. And like, what's really scary, it was really scary to walk away from something that you'd put so much work into, you know? And I think that is maybe why a lot of people stay on a pathway that maybe isn't feeding them anymore, even if it did previously. You could say the same for relationships, probably. You know, because you've put so much work to get to where you are. So if you leave, or if you sidestep too much, or if you change direction, like, are you throwing away all that work and that time and that effort?
Mm.
And I think that is really scary. And I think even for me, when I finished the job in Sydney, I still told myself, I was like, yeah, but I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to go sailing for a little while. I'm going to continue my artwork and I'm going to come straight back up to it. I'll probably move to New York where I'll get an even better job and then I'll climb it that way. Like, I still told myself I almost like lied to myself, or I didn't realize myself. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever. But you
Yeah.
kind of like, I sidestepped away from it, and I was like, no, it's just a break or just a thing. And I remember even afterwards, you know, I was working on boats and like living on boats, and I still remember being like so scared that all the work that I had put in to get to where I was in that career would just go to waste. And I think sometimes I think I still think about it, but funnily enough, now I kind of can see more and more how, even though I'm not in the same career, the skills some of the skill set that I used in that career are serving me well now. So it's not necessarily what you're doing, but it's like the skills and what you learned in doing that you can probably apply. So it's not the right idea to look at all the work that you put in is lost. It's
Mm.
You can say, okay, well, what did I learn from doing all that I can now apply to however my situation has changed. And I guess you could probably again say the same thing for relationships. Okay, that relationship broke down, whether it's a friend or whatever, and you say, well, what can I take from that, and what can I chuck away and say that was not good, and then what can I reapply
Yeah.
and take it forward. But yeah, it's not hard, and I think it's definitely scary. And then even from that, you know, I'm like, oh, it seems such a shame. Like, I knew so much about art and all of that, and now I don't use it. But actually, it's an enjoyment to myself. Like, I get pleasure from what I know about art, and when I go to a gallery, or like, that interest is still an interest to me, and it still enriches my life, whether it's what I'm doing professionally or not. But that depth of me, of my brain, and of what I know, that enriches my being, because you apply what you know, your subconscious, to the world and to the life around you, whether you know you're doing it or not. And that's kind of like a thing back to galleries and curating, like the viewer or the audience brings their own life perception to it. So you bring all your past experiences to your daily life and whatever you're doing. So it's not a waste, because it's made you who you are. Oh,
Exactly. Oh, what a lovely little you tied it up in a bow for me there at the end. That was beautiful. Amazing.
I didn't even plan that.
It kind of crosses over into my last question, which is, what rule, ritual, or regulation would you try to apply from sailing to art, if you could?
From sailing to art, I think there's two things, and I think they're in, I don't know if it's from, I apply it a lot. I think about it more in my sailing career now, but I think you could probably get it from one and bring it to the other. I don't think it's necessarily from sailing back, but I definitely use it in my sailing now when things are tough. And I think it's kind of well, it's one thing. It's like, always know your why and try to come back to your why. Why, especially, I think it's particularly when you're in a passion job or a passion career where you're really pursuing something, and it's not about the money, it's not about the career. Or even if you're an entrepreneur, you know, you're kind of working hard to forge something, and you get lost, and you're just, times are hard and it's not working, and you're like, why am I doing it? And I think coming back to your why, and I think there should be two whys, if you can, like your internal why and your external why. And for me, I really, with the sailing and the projects that I'm building, and with the projects that I'm building with sponsors, it's huge. Our outward communication is really about female empowerment, female participation in sports, female equality, and really about creating role model and example and encouraging more female participation in sport, and particularly in water sports from a young age, but across the board. And really believing, I really do believe that the greater level and support of female participation in sport and all of that, from those who participate to those who spectate, can really have like a ripple effect in the rest of society and the rest of the world for many of the things that we talked about, such as confidence, lessons that you learn, but on so many playing fields. And I think we're really seeing that with women's rugby, for example, and all of that, and just the lift that it gives them, and the lift that it gives girls, and the lift that it gives everyone. And that's a huge part of what we do in our projects. And with my projects, I really try to, where I can, in that, create opportunity for other girls, women's, whatever, to experience offshore sailing, to learn about the industry, to, you know, open up the project to that. So that's like really my external why, and that's hugely tied into my sponsors and why my sponsors are on board and the project we build and how we communicate. So it is really a big external why, like, what is this about? It's not just about you know, it's me telling myself this is not just about me going sailing. You know, I can, what can I use? Can I use the fact that I'm able to go sailing to try and contribute to a bigger cause somehow? And that also ties into, you know, if we sail, we're engaged with the sea and the ocean. So that makes us think more about nature and the ocean. And it's also linked to that sustainability side, which is also a huge part of it. But for me, the number one is really female in sport. That is my why. And I can do something about that. Like, I can be a role model. I can give opportunity. I can speak about it. I can put out content that is empowering and encouraging, and you know, do that. So it's something I can do. So, and I can engage with sponsors who are interested on that level. You know, that's my choice, something I can do. And I think that goes, you know, I think I still applied that when I was working in art as well, because the artists that we worked with in the gallery, I had kind of a list of, you know, 3 reasons why a piece of art was good in my book. Why, like, how do you decide if an artwork is good or not? And you make up your own rules. But one of my rules was, why was this art made? You know, like, did they just draw a picture for the sake of drawing a picture? Or what is the story behind it? Why was it made? What is it telling us? Like, what is the reason, and why is this art? And is it actually giving something to the world that it exists in? Or was the artist giving something, or has the artist, you know, deeply researched something? And so the why behind it there. And then the internal why is, you know, keeping the love and the power and the fire for what you do, and not losing that fire. And if you feel like you're losing it, catch it and figure out why, and reignite it, and keeping that like passion and that why within you, because you need to do this for you, and because you love it, and why you started doing it, and that kind of thing. So I think they're both applicable to the 2 things.
Yeah, I love that. That's just generally just a very good life lesson, I think.
There, we just got to abide by my own life lessons now. Easy to
there
say.
You go. Oh, I mean, yeah, we're all the best at giving advice and not taking it ourselves, but that's for another day. But look, before I let you go, I want to make sure that people know where to go if they'd like to find out more about you, maybe engage on social media. As you said, you do a lot of the external why is on there. So feel free to share whatever you'd like about your platforms and let people know where they can find you. And then I'll include links as well when the episode's out.
Yeah, so on Instagram, of course, Pamela Lee free. So there's a lot of stuff there. You can find out more about what offshore sailing is and me. We post a lot of stuff up there. And if you message me there, normally, if you have an interest or any questions or want to talk about women in sport or anything like that, usually Instagram's pretty good. I'll get back to you at some point. And then otherwise, I do have a website, which is PamelaLeeSailing.com. And there's also my email and a bit more background information in a more formal setting. And that's, but anyone and everyone is very welcome to get in touch.
Fabulous. And I also can't finish up without giving a shout out to Lisa Carroll for connecting the 2 of us. She's an absolute legend. So thank you, Lisa, for connecting myself and Pamela.
She'll be like, Pam's just repeating the lessons I've taught her. I'm like, yes, Lisa. Lisa is my life and mental coach, and we work together on goal setting and managing a lot of what we said, managing that disappointment and sidestepping and stuff like that. And she's a superwoman.
She is fabulous. Pamela, thank you so much for being on Your Player Mine. I think illuminating is the words that I'm going to use to describe the conversation today. And I've no doubt whatsoever that the listeners will feel the same. So thank you so much again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's such an interesting comment. I feel less alone knowing that there's actually a podcast of people who both like sport and art in the same levels. So it's really, really cool. It's really nice. Can't wait to see your next guests.